Alright, if you were wondering what time it is, it's time to tie John Barr's Graphic Caddis. This is one I've been asked about a lot, and someone reminded me, and I thought this would be a great video, so we're going to do this one today. I'll start off by saying John Barr is simply the most creative tyer I've ever known, and that's saying something. I know a lot of tyers. He has got a variety of great patterns, the Copper John, the Barr Merger. Every one of them is purpose-built, and that's something I really admire about him. And this is his caddis pupa. It's called a Graphic Caddis, and this is tied on a TMCO 2499 SPBL, which is a 3 extra wide super point hook. You can see it's got that barbless super point, and I really like that point. It's super sticky sharp, really holds fish well. And I tie my version a little bit different than John ties his. That's I think any tyer is going to have their own little variation on the theme, but I'll show you how I do it, and it's just minor variations. So I'm going to start with I'm tying a size 14 here. I'm going to start with some size 14/0 Vivus thread in white. John uses olive under the olive tubing, and it makes it darker than what the caddis pupa I'm seeing typically are, so I'm going to use white underneath here. And I'm going to start the thread about 2 or 3 eye lengths back from the hook eye, and then I'm going to work back down around the bend a bit, and then come forward again. And 70 denier UTC thread in white would work fine here as well. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of olive midge tubing, and this is for a size 14. If you get down into the smaller sizes, you might go to micro tubing, but for a size 14, midge tubing is fine. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a little bit of a stretch. That makes this stuff a little bit softer, a little easier to wrap, just a little bit more pliable. So I'm going to give it a little stretch. Don't go crazy with it, just give it a little stretch. And I'm going to tie it in up here at the front and try to keep it right on top and get a good anchor point there. And the reason I left that long end is because I'm going to pull on this back end as I wrap back over it to keep it small. And if I nip that off or tie it in short, I'll probably pull it out from underneath those thread wraps. So I'm just saving myself that step of having to redo it. And I'm going to wrap back over this tubing. I'm trying to keep my thread flat all the way back to the beginning of that thread base. Back here at the bend, and I'll just clip that in my material spring from there. And now I can come in and trim that stub out, and you can see if I stretch that and trim it, it comes down damn near flush with the thread wraps. Now the little tag in that we're going to put at the back is holographic tinsel, and small or medium will work fine. I've got about 9 feet of medium hanging off of this spool here, so I'm going to use some of this. And this is going to be a little tag here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to catch it here just short of the bend with a couple turns of thread, and I'm going to turn that around and pull it right out. So I know you wanted to see that again, so I'll unwrap those wraps. I'll pull that down again, maybe not quite so flush this time. Get that little stub out of the way. We'll fold that flash, and I'm just going to get a couple of overlapped turns there at the bend, and then I'll tie it off. So you can see it's just a little, my camera, get our focus back, just a short little tag there, and then I'll trim that stub end out. Now I'm going to use my thread to build my taper. And caddis pupa, one of the most prominent things I've always noticed about them is that they've got a reverse taper. They're fatter at their back end than they are at their front end. So I'm going to just work this thread back and forth to fatten this fly up a bit. And again, I'm on a 14, so this is about as big as I usually tie these. So it's going to take a bit more thread work than it would on a smaller size, but I want to fatten that back end up. And again, tying left-handed like I do, I don't have to worry too much about that thread twist. But if you're tying right-handed, you're probably going to need to accommodate that. So I'm going to fatten that up toward the back and sort of taper down toward the front, so we've got sort of a teardrop shape there. Now I'm going to pick up my tubing, and I'm going to come over that flash, kind of pull forward on that first wrap, and then just continue up over the thread underbody. And I'm just butting these turns one in front of the other, right up to the end of that thread underbody, and then I'll tie that tubing off there. trim that out. So there's our Graphic Caddis body. Now what I typically do is I'll whip finish this white thread a couple turns and I'll switch to black. So I'll just start black 14 right over where that random piece of dubbing in there. Black 14 off right over where I ended that white thread. Now the collar on this fly is sort of the tricky part. And what we want to use here is a partridge body feather. And what we're looking for is a feather with sort of that brown band on it. And you can see this feather's got a pretty square tip. That's what we're looking for here. So I'm going to strip all this fluff down. I'm going to grab the feather by the tip ends and kind of pull everything that's not the tip end down out of my fingertips, like so. And you can strip this stuff off the bottom. Really doesn't matter. You can clip that out too. So you've just got this little triangular shaped piece of feather. And then what I'll do is I'm going to come in and just barely open the tips of my scissors, and I'm going to trim the center stem out like so. So I've got a nice tight V there. I don't want a big notch. Let me show you what you don't want. Let me get another feather here. What you don't want to do is come in like so and leave that big wide notch. Just the very center stem is what we want. So we've got a narrow notch like so. Alright, so I'll go back to my original feather. And what I'm going to do here, you can see I've got just that narrow little notch. My thread's hanging just in front of the body. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to lay this in, and I want these tips to just come maybe just proud of the hook bend. I'm going to lay them on either side of the hook. Let me position this in my hand so you can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to lay this on top of the hook with the base of the V just in front of the body. Like so. And then I'm going to kind of push down with my material hand to encompass those fibers around the hook. I'm going to take a soft wrap, and I'm sort of exaggerating. See how loose that wrap is there? And as I come around, I'm going to tighten this turn and let those fibers sort of splay around. You can kind of help them along a bit if you need to. I missed a couple there. There we go. So we've got those spread all the way around the hook. And you can see how you can kind of manually distribute. You know, if they don't go perfectly even, you can kind of push them down out of any place that they're heavy, and then take a couple turns of thread back over them. The thread will, you know, that's what you fight in fly tying 99% of the time, is the thread twisting the material around. That's exactly what we're trying to get it to do here. So now this is where a good fine tip pair of scissors comes in handy. You want to come in and trim the tip of that feather out as close as you can, just so you don't end up with a bunch of stubs. Hold your thread out of the way so you don't cut it. And then I can smooth that off a bit. And I'll get a bit more of a flare on that. You can see I just made a tighter turn there to spread that hackle out along the front edge of the body. And don't worry about it being exactly perfect 360 degrees. We're just trying to create some legs and little wing buds that are kind of starting to poke out. Now for the head on this fly, this is just natural gray ostrich herl. And what you want is an ostrich herl that's got really nice thick, let me cut this one out, nice thick long flues. You can see how wide that feather is. You know, and it's all relative to your hook size, so the biggest, thickest ones you should save for the biggest ones. You know, if you think about sizing it like hackle, but see how wide those are? And you can see at the base, those are always tapered, so I'll cut that base off. And then ostrich herl has, I'll see if this will show on the camera. You can see that stem sticks out to one side. That's the, let's see here, that's the outside of the feather. So I'm going to strip the base of that feather. I'm going to tie it in with the outside forward. And I'll wrap right up to the base of that partridge feather. And then I'm going to bend this feather so that the outside is going to sit to the front. Got one hackle fiber in there. And then I fold this like a soft hackle. So I'll just wet my fingers, and I want to stroke those fibers back to one side. And then I'll begin wrapping. And so what this is doing is putting the bare stem on the front edge of the turn. And I can slightly overlap these turns as I go. And if your fingers are just a little bit damp, it helps. I didn't say wet, they shouldn't be slobbery wet, but you do you, man. I'm not going to judge. Take 4 or 5 turns up there toward the front, and then tie that ostrich feather off with a couple turns. And I come in and just nick that center stem. A couple turns to clean up the thread head, and then I'll whip finish. And I've kind of matted all that ostrich down. But what I'll usually do is kind of pop this, and as they dry out a bit, you can see they'll comb back into like a little micro soft hackle collar there around the front of the fly. So if you treat an ostrich feather, peacock feathers will do the same thing if you've got big thick ones, but if you treat it like a soft hackle, you can sort of direct the angle of the fibers and how they sit. And that's our finished Graphic Caddis. Really a cool fly, really pretty easy. It's not a hard fly to tie. Great dry dropper fly. You can tie it with a bead head, certainly. I typically just fish it just like this, let it kind of sit right just a few inches under the surface. You can fish it on the swing, you can fish it dead drift down deep with some split shot. Caddis pupa is an emergence, and an emergence is a fly pattern of an emerger is really a snapshot of what should be a motion picture. So there's a lot of stages to emergence, and those bugs appear anywhere from the bottom all the way to the top. So don't feel like you have to only fish emergers up in the surface film. You can fish them anywhere in the water column. But that is our little finished Barr's Graphic Caddis. Great little fly. You can tie it in tan. Tan and olive are the 2 official colors, but microtubing comes in a billion colors, and you can kind of get the gist of what you can do with any of those. But that's the one, man. That's a good one. Thank you, John Barr. I miss that guy. I have to go rattle him up. Of course, these days I miss everybody, and that's saying something. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll be back with some more. We'll keep us busy during this shutdown and give us something to do. All right, take care.